Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the EU-Canada Business Day, Green Back Better. I'm Delphine Adenau-Ousu, the Executive Director of the EU Chamber of Commerce in Canada, UCAN. I would like to acknowledge that I stand on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. I would also like to express UCAN's solidarity to Ukraine and its people. Before I give the floor to Adrienne Thomas, UCAN President, and to our speakers, I would like to take you through today's agenda. We will have the opening session following by the first session on circularity. We will then have a 15 minutes break, and at 8:30 Pacific time, 11:30 Eastern time, and 5:30 European time, we will ride on to the session on urban mobility. After another break of 15 minutes, we will start our last session on sustainable finance, and it will start at 9:30 Pacific time, 12:30 Eastern time, and 6:30 European time. Make sure you click on the right session on the left-hand side of your screen. I also invite you to use the chat function to network and to visit the virtual booth to meet with representatives of Canadian provinces and European member states. To all our panelists and moderators today, I wanted to warmly thank you on behalf of UCAN, and to our participants, I hope you enjoyed the discussion and learned as much as I did during the prep call. Feel free to drop some questions and comments in the Feedloop chat, and we will try to answer them as much as possible. If not, we'll do a follow-up. Wishing you all a great event, and over to you, Adrienne.
Great. Well, thank you, Delphine. It's my pleasure to open and welcome all our participants to the second edition of our EU-CAN Business Day. As Delphine mentioned, we'll be focusing on the transition of our economies to net zero. To introduce myself, I'm Adrienne Thomas. I'm the president of the European Chamber of Commerce in Canada. For those of you who may not know us, the EU-CAN works as the business voice of European companies operating in Canada. We focus on three pillars. We focus on information, providing information around CETA, the trade agreement, but also business practices and industry practices. And we coordinate sessions such as the session today to help all our business colleagues learn and collaborate together. We represent more than 635,000 employees across Canada, if you look at the reach of European companies operating in Canada. And we provide advocacy. And one of the key pillars of advocacy that we're working on is really around sustainability. So how do we address the common affairs and voice the concerns to the appropriate stakeholders? Our organization is made up of members from the different member state chambers of commerce in Canada, and we're also now open to corporate members. So feel free to reach out if you have some interest in joining our organization. I'd like to move on with a few opening remarks before we get to the panel session here. First, I'd like to express, as Delphine mentioned, our solidarity with Ukraine and our full support of the measures adopted by both the Canadian and the European governments. For many of us, this war hits home. Canada is home to one of the largest Ukrainian populations outside of Ukraine. And as we enter this 47th day, we are focused on the humanitarian efforts and the support and measures that are being adopted by our governments, and the incredible displays of European and Canadian solidarity with the people and the authorities to bring peace to the region. To touch upon this conflict, I think it's important to understand the most important certainly is the lives lost in this humanitarian crisis. However, I think we also have to acknowledge that it's creating major disruptions in the world that we're living in. And it's brought to light certain reliance that we have on Russia for some of our key value chains. And this is critically important as we speak as well of the sustainable recovery to net zero. So this war is placing a global food security under increased pressure and stress the needs to build resiliency in our agricultural sectors worldwide, and to do this in line with our climate and economic goals. In Europe in particular, it's underlined our economy's dependency on Russian energy, such as gas, oil, and coal imports. And last but not least, it's exposed our vulnerability of some of our minerals and material supply chains critical to the development of the production of carbon neutral solutions. Here again, I think this developing a stable and sustainable source of supplies and reliable trade partners is critical. And here, I think the relationship between Europe and Canada will help us move the world forward and to succeed in a green and digital transition. So as we move back, the most immediate attention, of course, is the humanitarian efforts, but we're also at a crossroads. We cannot stop working on our climate actions. Last Monday, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report on measures that should be taken to tackle global warming. This note reports that emissions continue to increase globally in recent years, and that the target reductions pledged by countries by 2030 are not enough to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So it's also warning us that greenhouse gas emissions must peak at 2025 at the latest for us to move forward. Among other things, the IPC is calling for a sustained reduction in the use of fossil fuels such as coal and gas, and for a transition to renewable resources such as solar and wind power. But it also outlines that achieving these goals will not be fixed with renewable energy alone, but we also have to look at enhanced energy efficiency systems and alternative fuels such as hydrogen. So it's my belief that more than ever, our governments and our industries need to work hand in hand on both sides of the Atlantic to scale up faster the pace of society's transition to this carbon neutrality. And so at this point, I would like to introduce our key guests this morning. First, I would like to introduce Her Excellency Melita Gabrick, the Ambassador of the European Union to Canada. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Adrienne. Good morning.
And I would like to welcome as well Mr. Goldie Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Thank you both for joining us today on this great topic.
Good morning, Deepak, and everyone else.
So by means of introduction to the issues that bring us here today, I was thinking that I would like both of you to share your thoughts just on the implications of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the EU-Canada relations, and notably in context of this discussion today from an economic and energy standpoint. Perhaps, Ambassador, I could go to you first for some comments.
Well, thank you very much, Adrienne, Delphine, for organizing this business days. It is always a pleasure to speak to European companies present here in Canada. And Goldie, good to see you again. I am grateful for your efforts and EU-Can's efforts to bring the European business community in Canada together. It is important that we have this platform to meet and to talk, exchange views, ideas, good practices. Now, to your question, Adrienne, regarding the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the relationship between the EU and Canada. Well, let me first say that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked war against the Ukrainian people, against a peaceful, sovereign, and independent country. And this war is causing such suffering and devastation. And it brought, however, it brought us even closer with Canada. It has also changed the world we live in significant ways. Among other things, very importantly, the geoeconomics is changing dramatically. And this has impact also on our relations and potentially on our cooperation on energy security, on food security, on critical minerals as well. Well, but basically, in broader terms, we are now proving once again that the EU and Canada are closest of partners and allies. We are actually really closer than ever, and we're working hand in hand on sanctions against Russia and in support of Ukraine in myriad of ways, including by supporting Ukraine financially, supporting refugees, offering diplomatic military support as well. We work together to overcome the challenges of COVID, we are pulling together in response to this threat to European security, but also to global stability and to the global world order. We are really aligned on sanctions with which we aim to curb the ability of Russia to finance the war and to contribute to conditions that will be conducive to bringing the war to a peaceful settlement. Perhaps, with this, I wanted to share these remarks at the outset, but if we can then talk more about energy security, that would certainly be one facet in our reaction to put in place sanctions that will curb the ability of Russia to finance the war. This is one facet that we are working very, very intensely upon, and that we are also having discussions with Canada on.
Great. And maybe Goldie, I can pass it over to you, and I feel free to make some opening comments, but to tie back to what the ambassador just mentioned, in some degrees, Canada may feel far from Europe. And how do you think Canada can play a role in terms of future energy security, and in particular, green energy security?
Well, let me first thank you, Adrian, for the opportunity, and always good to be with my friend, the ambassador, who recently came and gave me all this branded material that I'm using today, EU and Canada. Look, let me just echo, first of all, and just simply say ditto to all the comments made about Ukraine. And let me just add that from a Canadian business perspective, we've been doing what we can to provide support, whether it is from financial support through donations that are being matched by governments and others, whether it's the immediate compliance to the sanctions that were put in place. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's happening, I think, as quickly as it can. And finally, the humanitarian crisis aspect of this, to be available to bring and support those who may only be here for a temporary period, but to give them that opportunity to be in a safe place as they await the liberation and the ongoing defense of their country. So I just wanted to add that from a business perspective. Larry Summers recently described the environment in which we're operating in as the need for a new seriousness. And I think what this war has done has really brought about a reality check about the realpolitik of the environment in which we operate. And I think it's a sobering moment for all of us to recognize that, when Russia moved into Crimea, the response, unfortunately, in Europe was to buy 25% more gas over a period of time after that took place, because of the reliance. There's nothing you can do. You need it from where you need it, and you're getting it from where you get it. So as the ambassador and I discussed, this is the moment to say, what can you do about it immediately? Not much, actually. What can you do about it in the midterm to the long term? A lot more. But it requires leadership, and it requires this notion of a reality check where I think we have to be honest with people, that on the question of the need for energy versus the desire to become net zero society, it is a journey. It is not a switch. It will take time, and there's a lot of policies and a lot of infrastructure that is going to need to be done to make that transition. No one is questioning the need for the transition. None of our members or anybody are not committed to net zero. People are making those commitments. They're laying out those plans, but they're also plans based on heavy bets. A lot of this is going to be about two things: innovation and change in human behavior. Neither one of those things are actually easy to do, as it turns out. And so we're going to have to work together to make sure that the countries like Canada that can export natural resources, including food and other things that may be necessary in other parts of the world, have the capacity to build the infrastructure to do so. Whether it's pipelines, whether it's grids, whether it's port expansions, whether it's rail expansions, if we don't have the opportunity to get product to market, which has been, with all due respect, suffocated for over 20 years now, not much has been built. And so when the ambassador and I met, I said, one of the things we need from Europe is your voice. We need the credibility of your commitment to climate transition to come here and to be able to say part of climate transition means, in the short term, we need the allies of ours who have gas, LNG, oil, and others doing it in a much more responsible way. It's unbelievable that the President of the United States is making calls to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Iran, two of whom haven't even returned his call, begging for oil, and has to reach into 50 million barrels of reserve, 180 million barrels that since then have been announced, and corporations have been instructed, you need to find another million a day. That is the reality check that we need to paint for people to say this transition is not just like that. We are going to need to leverage the energy resources to bring about the transition and the successful transition for the net zero agenda that we have. So one of my messages is need your voice. Secondly, it's and, not or. It's energy and the climate transition. And I think we can talk a little bit more about how that happens.
Thank you, Goldie. And if I could add my my short comment to that, I like the word and as we work together, and certainly, hopefully, from these sessions that we do later today, people will get some ideas, because I think through this idea sharing, we can find more solutions. One of the things that we've been voicing at EUCAN is that there are experiences that we can learn from climate agenda in Europe in terms of what codes and regulations have worked, what business policies and things have been adopted that work, and what do those work and which ones don't work, so that we can better help the government here understand what policies and legislation can help or hinder our transition. And we did see an ambitious budget put forward in terms of a lot of intent to spend on greening, and perhaps through we can get businesses on both sides to share what is working for us to collaborate more. One of the things that I think that is necessary in addition to this energy transition is we're going to have new technologies, and we are certainly moving to a more digital world so that we can be more efficient. We're seeing the explosion of electrification all over, and we're going to have a session on e-mobility. And this requires resources. And so one of the other main topics here, I think, as we transition is, do we have the supply chain in process for critical minerals that will allow us to produce the technologies and the equipment needed, batteries, for example, for EV, but many other different critical minerals. So last week, the Canadian federal budget included an investment for $2 billion to accelerate this production of critical minerals. Europe can be a key trading partner, and Europe has also is enforcing its carbon mandates through its carbon border adjustment mechanism to make sure that the minerals and the supplies it's bringing into Europe are energy conscious, I would say. So perhaps I can hand it back off to the ambassador and some thoughts there in terms of partnerships, trade, collaboration around strategic minerals and the whole value chain. And I think we've seen through COVID with the supply of vaccines and other things, the strong partnership and respect for trade agreements between Canada and the EU. How do you see similar strengths in terms of minerals and materials and the intertwining of our supply chains across the Atlantic?
Yeah, no, thank you, Adrian. I would just like to add a few points on energy, if I may first.
Sure.
Well, focusing on the present and the future, the urgent goal of Europe is to phase out our dependency on Russian oil and gas. And this is where we are looking at what we can do with Canada, not only in a short, but also in the medium and long term to help with the energy security in Europe. And as you pointed out, and as Goldie pointed out, we need to figure out how we can enhance EU's energy cooperation with the like-minded Canada to phase out Russian sources of energy, while simultaneously pursuing a green transition. Yes, we cannot stop working on our climate goals in view of this energy situation, but certainly since we are also working together on technologies, developing green technologies, we can do more together also in this regard with Canada. So let me just mention that we are discussing, for example, increased exports of Canadian gas and oil through the development of supporting infrastructure, which can or could progressively be used for hydrogen. And the last thing I wanted to mention in this regard is that now we have a dedicated working group on green transition and LNG, that was set up at the following meeting between the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. So the goal of this working group is to develop a concrete action plan on how to enhance our cooperation on energy security, while also looking at green transition. In terms of critical raw materials, certainly the goal of the EU is to ensure a secure and sustainable supply of these materials. Now, a key element of this goal is to diversify our supply. We want to steer our dependence away from a handful of countries, and mind you, they are not like-minded countries that we are quite dependent upon, such as Russia and China. As the COVID crisis showed, and now the Russia's war is showing again in no uncertain terms, it is supremely important to have supply chains with like-minded countries, to have integrated chains with people, with the countries that share our values of transparency, environmental standards, rule of law, and so forth. And of course, we want Canada as a very like-minded country to be our privileged partner. We call it a privileged partner in critical materials. Like just last year, I guess it was at the summit in June, we agreed on this strategic partnership on raw materials. It has already been producing results. We are working closely with Natural Resources Canada to bring into the conversation private sector and provincial governments. For example, we organized a series of meetings between the provinces and also businesses, along with our economics and trade counselors here. And basically what we've seen is that there is a big interest. There's big interest on both sides. And I would say this bodes well for our cooperation on raw materials, as does what we've seen just last week, the new Canadian federal budget that allocates funds for Canada's first critical minerals strategy. And just to mention the last thing, again, at the PDAC conference in June, we will have a strong European presence there. And certainly there will be opportunities to explore where we can and our businesses can work together to actually put into practice this partnership and our plans to integrate our raw materials, critical raw materials supply chains with Canada.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly great to hear all the different interactions at different levels of government talking about this, and to hear that kind of consistency or the will to want to move forward on these topics. We are running out of time, but I will ask maybe each of you just for one last quick comment, and maybe for Goldie, what I would go to you is just kind of to close up. What do you feel in terms of our respective industries? What can businesses bring to this net zero? So if there's one thing you want to leave our audience with in terms of what do you think the most important thing for businesses that we can do to kind of drive forward to this net zero future?
R&D is the answer. Collaboration, because at the end of the day, government sets policies and sets targets. It's the business community that needs to do the innovation. And working in partnership with universities and others, we've got to figure out how it is that we're going to, change the way in which we think of some of these issues. I'm really pleased with the budget support for the CCUS agenda, which I think is going to be the first piece of making sure that we're bringing down the emissions, but obviously hydrogen, blue, green, SMRs, the small modular reactors. I know there are many European countries who've had a second look at nuclear. I think the SMR solution is a part of it as well. And there are things we don't even know. We only know what we know, but there's a lot of things that we don't know. And to get from where we are to where we need to be, not just 2030, but 2050, I think you're going to see batteries that may be made without cobalt, for example. What else could they be made of? How else can we do that? And I think R&D collaboration between Europe and Canadian businesses and others who are of like mind, I think will go a long way in giving us not only the ability to reach our targets, but perhaps to even do it sooner. Thank you, Goldie. Ambassador, any final comments in terms of what you feel that we can do more to advance this net zero ambition? Yeah, no, certainly. You know what, I concur with what Goldie just said in terms of the importance of focusing on innovation, on technology development, green technology development, and we will certainly continue to support businesses to create investments, to invest in different enterprises in terms of raw materials, in terms of energy infrastructure. And of course, also our collaboration on science, technology, innovation. We are working on this big project, Horizon Europe, to bring Canada as an associate partner, where we will have a large swath of opportunities to work together. And of course, we are also working together, and we should continue on developing standards, criteria in environmental, social, and governance. And this certainly businesses or certainly understand how important it is to have these in terms of a level playing field. And I just want to quickly mention some areas where we want to work with Canada. These are hydrogen, reduction of methane emissions, electric vehicles, and also increased share of renewable in the energy mix. Great, thank you, Ambassador. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. I think I would like to thank both our guests for your participation today and for your insights. For me, I'm very optimistic after hearing both of you. What I see is there's a will both in government and how Canada and Europe are working together. I see where there's a will from the business community to drive forward, and optimistic around different potential solutions. So where there's a will, there is a way. And so I do, this does give me great optimism as we move forward. And I will pass it back to Delphine to transition us into our sessions today. Thanks again, Ambassador. Thanks again, Goldie. Have a great rest of the day for all the participants. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Goldie. I think that's really